Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Did the wife sleep with the boss for the good of the marriage? Did today's situation force the wife to do the inevitable? This story will have a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Okay. I know this is the oldest, most far-fetched situation imaginable, but it actually happened. I wish I could tell you in some flowery or unusual way that I discovered that my wife was cheating on me, but I can't. It was like the old, bad story cliché. I work for an auto parts manufacturer, I do the brakes, someone has to do it, and Lux smiled on me from 4 to midnight every day, 5 days a week for 8 hours. I work on one of the most archaic machines you've ever seen. I wear safety glasses, earplugs, steel-toed boots, and a denim apron. I meet my quota every day, and if I'm lucky, I'll get a bonus at the end of the year. I have a small, cozy house with 3 bedrooms, a beautiful wife, and 2 sons, both in primary school. After 12 years of marriage, everything was going well until today. We have 5 stations that put the pads together, they all run on compressed air. For 8 years, we have not had any problems with the equipment. Today, mid-shift, the compressed air system froze. The air used to operate all our machines must be absolutely dry. It is filtered and dehydrated by automatic equipment that never fails, well, almost never. The dehumidifier system was unable to release accumulated moisture. Tonight, I'm no scientist, so all I know is that when moisture and high-pressure air come together, freezing occurs, and everything comes to a complete stop. Instead of making us sit around doing nothing, they just sent the whole team home without pay. Of course, I guess you could say that my whole life was ruined by accumulated moisture. When I opened the bedroom door, all I saw was a big, hairy back bouncing up and down on my wife, Marcy. Of course, I instinctively turned on the overhead light. When I realized Marcy was awake, damn it, Danny, what the hell are you doing at home? I expected her to be scared, apologetic, and ashamed, but all I got was a pissed-off attitude. What the hell is going on? Oh, don't be such a jerk. You know perfectly well what's going on. I'm so sorry you had to see this, but if you had come home when you were supposed to, this would never have happened. He would never have been here, or I would never have seen him. The hairy back turned and now looked at me with a grin. Marcy pulled the blanket up in a feeble attempt to maintain her modesty. My big mistake was grabbing this guy when he got out of bed. He was much larger than when he lay down. I was rewarded for my foolish enthusiasm with 2 very, very hard blows to the ribs. I never managed to hit him, and I lay on the floor struggling to catch my breath. I'm not sure, but I think it was around this time that I received a blow to the side of my head that set me off. Anyway, I ended up in the hospital emergency room, where some medical technician was bandaging my ribs. Marcy sat on a chair near the examination table with a disgusted expression on her face. The technician finished and left the room. Marcy, who the hell is this guy, and what was he doing in our house? His name is Tony, he is my friend, and I invited him to my place. You had intim with him? You did it with him in our bed? Our children were sleeping just down the hall. Yes, I know. If you hadn't caused such a commotion, they would never have woken up. I had to ask my sister to look after them so I could bring you here. What the hell was he doing there? How many times are you going to ask the same question? We had a night, we indulged in fornication. Is it really that hard to understand? Is this a common thing, or the only time? Tony and I have been dating for about 6 months. We tried to keep this a secret from you. Although we usually don't come to the house, I couldn't find a nanny. Is it over now? No, this is not the end yet, Danny. You're a good father and a good husband, but Tony is great in bed. I don't see any reason for us to stop this just because it has now been revealed to you. I promise you that we will not meet him in this house again. It's unfair to you and the children. I'm so sorry, Marcy, this is unacceptable. It's all over between us now. Danny, if you try to stop my relationship with Tony in any way, I guarantee you will regret it. You just got the crap knocked out of your head, and Tony didn't even break a sweat. I can assure you that it will happen again if you do or say anything. Everyone we know will know that your wife is sleeping with another man, and you're too snotty to stop it. All our friends and neighbors will be the first to know about this. I'll make sure your family knows everything about what a pathetic loser you are. The guys you work with will start calling you a cuckold. Think twice, Danny, your life will become hell. I bet even your sons will despise you. Do you really not care what they think of you? Do you want to make yourself look like a cheater just to humiliate me? I'll do it if I have to, but I bet you won't take this chance. Tony thinks you're a weakling, and I think he's right. You'll have to learn to live with it, Danny boy. Who the hell is this guy? Where does he work? It doesn't work, Danny. He is the owner of Continental Classics, a luxury car dealership on Lancaster Pike. You know the place you always wanted to go but never got to, and it's all, Danny. He's richer than you, he's smarter than you, and he's better in bed than you. Besides, he seems to be stronger and better with his fists than you. Why don't you just marry him if he's so damn good? That's why I keep you close, darling. Tony doesn't like children, and I'm not going to give up mine to be with him. You get to play houseman and daddy, and Tony gets all the love. Why is this so hard for you to understand? And I should like this agreement. You have no choice. You either live with it or the whole world will know what a loser you are. By the way, I'm moving all your things to the guest room. I don't think we need to share a bed anymore since the all is already out of the bag. I watched as Marcy stood up to leave. I was even glad that she left. Just curious, dear, but who took care of the children when you were out with Tony? Karen usually looked after them, but every now and then, I dropped them off at your parents' house. Oh, by the way, it was Karen who introduced me to Tony. I made a mental note to thank Karen as Marcy left the room. I was discharged the next morning. Marcy was not present at discharge. I had a choice, call someone or take a taxi. The taxi won. The children were at school, and Marcy was not at home. All my clothes and personal items were stacked on the guest bed. I'm sure Todd and Terry will have questions about these preparations. I decided to let Marcy explain everything. It took less than an hour to get my new home in order. Meanwhile, all sorts of thoughts were spinning in my head. There was no way in hell this was going to end the way Marcy had planned. The first thing I did was go down to the basement and take out my old telephone recorder. This would only work on a landline, but I had no other choice. Marcy almost always called on her cell phone. It only took 20 minutes to scoop it up and hide it behind some old paint cans. This was the first step. I felt like crap, but I was good enough to go back to work. They gave me some pain pills, but I wasn't crazy enough to take them and then operate the machine. Instead, I took a couple of large Tylenol tablets. The only thing Marcy seriously miscalculated was in my relationships with the guys I worked with. I told them everything that happened the night before. Everyone had their own idea, both good and bad. It was nice to know that friends would always be there when you needed them. We had an 8-hour shift ready to start, and each of us was going to spend it figuring out how to help fix everything. We took a break for dinner mid-shift. Okay, anyone have an idea? Glenn was the first to speak. I have no idea, but I have a cousin who works for that son of A. He does all the vehicle detailing. From what I understand, he hates DeMarco. If you need any information about the business, buildings, or work shifts, he can help you. This will definitely help me, Glenn. Anyone else? Danny, I have 2 shotguns and 2 pistols. I can provide them to any of us. None of them are registered, so there is nothing to worry about. Thanks, Barry, but that sounds a little more radical than I was hoping. Well, damn it, then you won't even want to listen to my idea, Freddie said. Freddie chuckled lightly in response to this remark. Tell us, Freddie, come on, tell us. I thought we could tie him to a tree with his legs spread and build a fire Indian style between his legs. Everyone really liked Freddie's idea, but unfortunately, it had to be rejected. Kyle was the only one who didn't offer anything, so we all just stared at him while we ate our lunches. What? Don't look at me like that. Yes, I have an idea, but it's kind of strange. Spit it out, Kyle. I remember reading somewhere about a prison in Arizona where all the child molesters wore pink jumpsuits. It must have been humiliating. I know this Tony guy isn't a child molester, but something like this would embarrass the hell out of him. You mean put him in a pink tracksuit? Can he just take it off? I thought if we could go in there, tie him up, and then spray him all over with pink paint, it could look spectacular. But then he will know who did it. First, we need to make him unconscious and then leave him tied to a chair until he is found. But how do we do it? With pills or hit him over the head? What do you mean? I can get a stun gun. All you have to do is sneak up and punch him. It's easier said than done. How do we get to him when he's alone, and how do we get close enough without him knowing? I don't know that. I just thought it was a good idea. The buzzer rang, and the machines were back to 4 hours of work. My quota for the night was lowered, so the other guys chipped in to match it. When I returned home, Marcy was already asleep. At least she kept her word not to bring that idiot into the house. I had no idea what I was going to do. Most of the things the boys and I talked about were like school pranks. I might as well put a flaming bag of dog poop on his doorstep. I needed real revenge. When I got up, it was already noon. The kids were at school, and I heard Marcy walking around the house. I quickly showered, shaved, and headed out the door. "Good morning, husband. Don't you have a kiss for your wife?" She stood at the kitchen sink with her hand on her hip and grinning. I just turned around and walked out. Her witty remark did not deserve a reply. I needed to have breakfast and be alone. I spent the rest of the day killing time. I was trying to figure out what I could do with my wife's intimate buddy without causing too much havoc. I needed to finish work tonight and start getting ready. I decided not to eat at home anymore. It was about the only time I could spend with the boys, but I just couldn't bring myself to eat Marcy's cooking anymore. Before I knew it, it was time to work. Everything was going fine until the dinner break. "Danny, I have a stun gun in my car. I don't know if you can use it for anything, but at least you can have it for self-defense." Kyle seemed proud of himself. "Don't forget to pick it up before you go home. Have you ever used that damn thing? We can try. Who wants to become a volunteer?" The only response was a chorus of sighs around the table. No one had any new ideas, but they were all willing to support whatever I came up with. I felt better knowing that I had friends. When I returned home, everything was fine. It would be a short night for me. Working the graveyard shift kind of messes with your sleep habits, especially on weekends. I got up earlier than usual. Todd and Terry jumped at the chance to hang out at Chuck E. Cheese. Marcy didn't seem to mind at all, especially when I told her we'd be out all day. "Danny, I need you to take a few days off next week. Tony's friend Wally will come over from Detroit, and we'll take a 3-night, 4-night cruise to Cancun. If you can't do it, would you like to see if your parents can? Let me get this straight. Are you going on a cruise with 2 guys? This sounds too lame even for you. Don't be rude, Danny, it doesn't suit you. Wally will be sharing a room with Karen. They've been old friends for a couple of years now." "Oh, well, damn it, I guess it's okay then." I try my best to be sarcastic. "I'll definitely thank Karen later." Of course, I started the day too early to kill time before Chuck E. Cheese opened. We went to Hobby Hall next to our house. The boys were big enough to assemble most of the plastic models that lined the shelves. The end results were nothing to brag about, but they had a lot of fun. I left them to explore hundreds of boxes and wandered around, marveling at all the crap that was available for purchase for creative housewives. I guess if Marcy was into crafts, she wouldn't have brought home that hairy gorilla, but now it was too late. My eyes lit up when I discovered rows of designer spray paint. Here they are, 6 beautiful cans of pink spray paint. They didn't have as much paint as Lowe's or Home Depot, but they were pink. This was the only place I saw paint of that color in a can. Of course, I took this as a sign and bought all 6 cans. Todd ended up getting the monster truck kit, and Terry chose the tow truck. I didn't even know they made plastic tow models. Before we left, I also grabbed a bag of 10 large plastic cable ties. They were about 18 inches long and looked fit for the task ahead. By this time, Chuck E. Cheese had opened. The kids spent about 4 hours and 2 pizzas before they ran out of steam. We grabbed a pack of cheap bread and headed to Pandora Park. The ducks ate it all in the first 10 minutes, but we stayed a couple more hours before heading to my parents' house. Mom and Dad were happy to invite us for dinner, and in the evening, Todd and Terry spent most of the night watching TV, and I took advantage of this to tell Dad about Marcy's situation. I realized that I was actually telling people what was going on before Marcy could. She threatened to do the same thing. I did it myself. Damn it, almost made her threat useless. Dad promised that they would be there to take care of the boys no matter what happened. This would make things a lot easier for my plan. I didn't want the boys to get hurt in this situation. Around 9 o'clock, I called Marcy to tell her that we would be staying the night at my parents' house. After a big breakfast at IHOP, we returned home to find Marcy still in bed. I immediately turned on the lawnmower and walked back towards the bedrooms. Todd and Terry couldn't wait to start making their models, even though it was a beautiful day outside. I let them go. I decided to spend the whole day working on the lawn. Edging and trimming needed to be done. Things weren't going as fast as usual because I stopped to chat often. I had some great hedge trimmers but decided to borrow them from Mike Fielding, who lives across the road. His wife, Mary, was one of the biggest gossips in the area. I explained to Mike that there might be strange cars parked outside the house because Marcy would be entertaining her male friends. Everything should be fine unless they get drunk and make noise. If this happens, just call the police. It will be difficult for me to control the situation since I work at night. Larry Finley served on the board of directors of a local church. I borrowed his spark plug key and apologized for Marcy's recent wild behavior. Of course, he wanted to know what I meant. Larry was an even bigger gossip than Mary Fielding. In 10 minutes, he had enough gossip fodder to last him a month. I didn't take a lunch break and finished work around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. After a quick shower, I headed to Rosie's CA and ordered the most expensive meal on the menu. I'm not sure if it was really like that, but it was actually delicious. I spent the rest of the evening with my brother Dave and his family. Dad had already explained to him what was happening. I spent the night on his couch. My wife had a great plan. She was going to force me to obey by threatening to expose me as a cuckold if I refused to condone and support her infidelity. She will make my life miserable. It was an interesting idea, but it had a lot of holes. Less than a week later, I already told everyone what was happening. This seemed to neutralize her threat. I was also able to present her to everyone as more of an approachable woman than she would otherwise have been able to. I don't think she ever expected any reaction from me. The next day, I went home to change clothes for work, and there Marcy was, waiting for me, seething with anger. "What the hell did you tell the neighbors?" "Karen said you told everyone that I run a brothel here at night." "Oh, darn it. That's not true, Marcy. I just told them that you can entertain men while I'm at work and that they shouldn't worry about it." "Well, that's not what's happening now at all." "Who else did you talk to?" "Everyone. I decided that I would tell them before you. It seemed much easier to me this way. I didn't say anything to your parents or sisters. Perhaps you should do this before they hear the rumors." "Darn it, Danny, you're making me look like a cheater." "Well, that's only fair. You wanted to make me look like a cuckold." "Sorry, dear, but I have to go to work. I need to spend some time with the kids before I leave." The hardest thing for me was losing the quality time I wanted with them. Glenn had the best news of the night. Continental Classics closed on Thursday at 9 o'clock, so Tony could personally write all the checks for Friday. He hated being disturbed while doing payroll, so even the cleaning staff left. Kyle took a few minutes and showed me how to use the stun gun. No one has volunteered to check it yet. The plan was ready to be executed. If I get caught, as I fully expect, I'll face jail time. I didn't care. Tony DeMarco needed to be humiliated. If I am arrested, I will make sure that all newspapers and television channels receive full information. Any advertising like that would crush him or at least make him angry enough to do something stupid. For the next few days, I only went home to sleep, shower, and change clothes. Since that first day, I have never eaten at home. Finally, Thursday came. I arranged for my truck to run out of battery, and for Kyle to pick me up. The floor attendant never bothered the slow guys much. As long as we met our quotas and the quality was good, they left us alone. One thing that would work in my favor is the OSHA requirements for this job. With aprons, gloves, and welding goggles, we all looked pretty much the same. At 8:30, I slipped out the back door. The guys will take turns working on my machine. One of these workplaces would periodically be empty, but no one would care. Bathroom breaks were common and were never supervised. The main thing was to create the illusion that I would not leave unnoticed. I walked through the service door of the Continental Classics and headed straight to the restroom. Around 9 o'clock, someone quickly checked to see if the lights were off. 10 minutes later, I put on latex gloves and walked from the toilet into the dimly lit office. His desk overlooked the showroom, so his back was to the door. It looks like everything will be much easier than I expected. There was a computer in front of him, but he was hammering away at something on an old adding machine with paper tape. He never heard me approach. I hit Tony right in the back of the head with the stun gun. His body jerked upward, and I thought he was going to turn around. So, I swung him again. This time, he jerked a few times and then relaxed. Perfect. I put 2 plastic wraps on each leg and 2 on each arm. I brought an old tie with me to use as a headband. He was very pliable. I wheeled his chair up to the glass display case next to the showroom. In the morning, when his people come to work, he will be visible. It was a nice pink color, but I had to use a lot more than I expected. The paint soaked into his clothes as quickly as I sprayed it. It took at least 3 coats on each area to get it to what I wanted. I had just enough paint, but barely. He looked very cute in pink. When I was done, I carefully packed everything back. I expected Tony to wake up while I was decorating him, but he never budged. I also planned to remove the blindfold before leaving. I glanced at my watch several times. I met my deadline, but I still wanted Tony to wake up before I left. After 5 minutes, I was already starting to worry. I tried to feel for a pulse, but to no avail. Maybe I didn't feel it because of the latex gloves. I took off my glove and tried again. There was still no pulse. I tried to feel the pulse in his neck like they did on TV. I still couldn't find anything. I took off the blindfold and touched his eyes with the tip of the pencil. He didn't blink an eye. There was no reflex. Needless to say, I started to panic. I had the presence of mind to put the latex glove back on and wipe off everything I might have touched. I put the tie in my pocket and then cut off all the plastic ties. There were visible marks that had no pink paint left on them when I removed them. It looked strange. The white skin under his tie made him look like a pink raccoon. I waited another minute to make sure I didn't miss anything, then left for work. On the way back to the store, I threw all my junk, including the stun gun, down the storm drain. 10 minutes later, I was sewing the brake pads again. Nobody noticed that I was absent. As soon as the shift ended, I told the guys what happened. They were all complicit, so I was pretty sure no one would say anything. Freddie was very impressed. None of them seemed bothered. Kyle drove me home, and we both mentally noted the time he dropped me off. I didn't sleep as long as usual. Around 10 o'clock, Marcy burst into my room. "What the hell have you done? What have you done, you little idiot?" Of course, I just rolled over and looked at her, puzzled. "What the hell are you talking about, woman? Tony is dead. Karen called and said he was found dead in the office this morning. I believe you had something to do with this, and I'll make sure you pay, you idiot." This was the second time she called me an idiot in the last 5 minutes. It was quite clear that I would not be able to sleep again, so I climbed out of bed and went to the toilet. I was in no hurry to face the Wicked Witch of the East, so I took a long hot shower and slowly shaved. I even sprayed on a little aftershave to annoy my loving wife. I never made it to the coffee pot. A tall black man stood in the living room talking to Marcy. He had a very short haircut and was wearing a dark suit. This guy called the police. There was no doubt about it. I shook my head and walked into the kitchen to drink my first cup of the day. Marcy smirked sarcastically as I sat down in my favorite chair. My uninvited guest also sat down. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Detective Darnell Green. I'm here about the death of Anthony DeMarco. Last night, your wife reported that you and Mr. DeMarco had a disagreement last week, and I would like to ask you a few questions." "Certainly, I have no objections, but not here." "What do you have in mind?" "If you want to talk, let's do it in your office, not at my house. Are you okay with that?" I couldn't help but notice Marcy's frown. I was pretty sure she was expecting to be included in the discussion. "My car or yours, Mr. Mercer? I have something else to do, so I'll meet you there." "Any special office?" "Second floor, at the back, room 206. Just turn right when you exit the elevator." See you soon. Marcy fumed when I put on my shoes. I didn't finish my coffee, so I just threw it down the sink. I turned and walked out the door with a smile. I think you'll get what you wanted, honey. What are you talking about? What the hell do you mean, Danny? 10 minutes later, I was sitting with Detective Green on the second floor of the municipal building. Over the next hour, Detective Green asked all the right questions, and I had all the right answers. He tried to be careful about this matter, not ignoring it or rubbing it in my face. Of course, I had to admit that I had a motive, but I never had the opportunity to do anything about it. It was a serious situation, but I tried my best to be friendly without making a smart fifth place of myself. I think he appreciated the fact that I made his job easier. And even though he had no questions left for me, the most interesting part of the discussion was the revelation that Tony died of some kind of heart problem. He had a pacemaker installed a couple of years ago, and I don't think it went well with the stun gun. Of course, they knew about the stun gun from the marks on his neck. I was very sorry that Tony died, but at the same time, I was glad. Detective Green gave the usual don't leave town speech and said he would get back to talking to me after checking my alibi. Wow, I never thought I'd need an alibi for anything. It was quite exciting. We parted on good terms. I felt like Darnell Green was on my side. It made me feel warm throughout my body. I took some food and watched the news on TV. There was a passage about the death of a local businessman. It noted that he had no known relatives. I emptied my bank accounts and then found time to have a nice breakfast. There was something to do at home. When I returned, Marcy was not there. It took me half an hour to move all my things back into the master bedroom and Marcy's things into the guest room. The guest room had one small closet and one chest of drawers. I put everything on the bed for her to put away. I checked the telephone in the basement and found nothing significant on it. I collected all the bank and insurance documents, as well as other important papers. I was glad that the Volvo Marcy was in my name. It made everything easier. Everything went into a folder under the front seat of my truck. I called into work and took 2 weeks off. A few hours later, my loving wife appeared. She seemed surprised to find me at home. It was time to restore order again. I smiled and led her to the guest room. What the hell is this? Who the hell are you? In response, I smiled widely. Answer me, damn it. What's going on anyway, Marcy? From now on, I will be living in the master bedroom. You can take the guest room. I suggest you start putting your clothes away. Anything that is not in the closet or dresser for dinner will be removed. Have questions? I can't fit my things in this small closet, and I'm not going to stay in this room anyway. What the hell do you mean, deleted? If you can't fit it in a closet or dresser, you don't need it. That won't happen, Danny. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it won't work. You are dead meat. I suggest you start putting things in order. If you have any more questions, I'll come back later, man. Today was the third time she called me an idiot. I must be doing something right. While Marcy was busy in the guest room, I threw her purse on the kitchen table. I took my time collecting everything I wanted first. I took her mobile phone and then the car keys from her wallet. I took out her driver's license and all her credit and debit cards. I put back everything that was left. I took her car papers out of the truck and drove the Volvo across town to a friend of mine who had a car lot. I immediately sold it to him at a good price, agreeing that he would sell it outside the city. Even with the payments, I ended up with a few extra in my pocket. I was just getting ready to go to Taco Bell for lunch when my cell phone rang. Son of a, what did you do with my cell phone, and where the hell is my car? I was happy that she didn't call me an idiot anymore. She was calling from her home phone. That was a good sign. I can check the records when I get back home. I'm so sorry, honey. I needed money to hire a lawyer to defend me against murder charges. I promise to buy you another car as soon as I get out of prison. She was still cursing on the other end of the line when I hung up and turned off my cell phone. After this conversation, I decided that a lawyer would be a really good idea, no matter what happened. I had no intention of staying married. That would have to wait, though, because I was next in line to order. Todd and Terry were home when I got there. I went straight to my sons and ignored Marcy altogether. I did glance in her direction a few times and noticed that she was not a happy tourist. The boys were eager to show me the models they had put together. As Marcy began preparing dinner, I wandered down the hallway to the guest room. All my clothes were back on the bed. All of Marcy's clothes went back to the master bedroom. I chuckled to myself but decided not to fight it now. She was firm in her thoughts and full of determination. Marcy told the boys to wash up for dinner, and I went to the guest room to get my things back together. I would really like to throw away all her things, but that would be too childish. Red Lobster was my place for dinner tonight. Money wasn't an issue because I still had cash left over after I gave the divorce lawyer the deposit. The shrimp and lobster combination was great, but the cheese buns were still my favorite dish. Having finished eating, the cell phone rang again. I was hoping one of the guys from work or Detective Green would call. No luck. Since the first call was from my wife. "Danny, how can I go to the store now? We need milk and a few other things. I'll take you when I get home. Try to arrange it so that we can go shopping on Saturdays when I don't work. I'll feel safer if you don't go shopping alone." They called me again. "I have to go. We'll talk when I get home." The second call was from Kyle. Detective Green spoke with the entire team individually, and as a group, all these stories were confirmed. Tom Tingle, floor manager, was the strongest supporter. He insisted that there was no way I could quit my job. He kept a tight rein on all his men and could guarantee that I was there all night. I knew I wasn't that smart. If any investigator wanted to prove that I killed Tony DeMarco, I'm sure he could do it. I had the feeling that no one cared. I got home just in time to put the boys to bed. Marcy was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine. I took a cold Foster's out of the refrigerator and settled comfortably in my chair. The TV wasn't on, so I decided now was the time to talk to Marcy. "So, Marcy, how is the plan to turn me into a wimp and a cuckold going?" Well, that ended the conversation before it even started. She finished her wine, stood up, and headed to her bedroom. I thought she wanted to talk. I guess I was wrong. I grabbed my beer and went to check the recorder. The first thing she did was call her sister. Everything was extremely open there. It turned out that Marge knew everything about the affair with Tony and supported Marcy in every possible way. That was nice to know. The next call was to Marcy's mom, and it was a little different. Mom had no idea what was happening. Her daughter convinced her that Tony was Karen's friend and that I was jealous because I had been trying to have a night with Karen for years. Tony lectured me about it, and I got angry. She never said I killed him, but that's definitely what she concluded. She called the cell phone company to see if she could get a replacement for the phone I borrowed and had no success. She then called the DMV and reported that I had taken her driver's license. They told her to report it to the police. She called the bank to ask for a replacement credit card but was told the account was closed. Let me put it this way, she was a busy little girl. The last call on the answering machine was Karen's. Karen only lived a few houses away, so I have no idea why they used the phone instead of just meeting. Of course, this worked to my advantage. I learned two important things from that call. Wally still had to come from Detroit, and Marcy was going to lay low and not make a fuss until he got here. The next day, the guys and I got up very early. We left the house before Marcy woke up. We returned home after lunch, and Marcy insisted that I take her to the grocery store. She needed things, and since she no longer had a car or driver's license, I had to take care of it. That evening, while she was preparing dinner, I checked the recorder. Wally arrived, and the first person he called was Marcy. It was an interesting conversation. He believed everything Marcy told him and vowed revenge. Wally and Tony grew up together, and he didn't want to let that go so easily. He gave Marcy his address and told her to call him the next day when she had a chance. Marcy immediately called Karen and enthusiastically began telling her how happy she was. I couldn't believe that this was the same woman I had been married to all these years. The change was so sudden and complete. I had no idea that what I did was so bad that I deserved it. Other than killing her lover, before I went to bed, I went out to get something to eat. Of course, the lawn needed to be mowed again, so the next day I had a good excuse to avoid Marcy. Around 11 o'clock, Marcy's mom and dad arrived to pick up the boys. I had no idea that a sleepover with my in-laws was planned, but I decided not to protest. Tomorrow was a school day, and Grandma Wilcox promised that they would get them there on time. I was eager to check my phone record, but lunch came first since I had skipped breakfast. After a quick shower, I went to see Dennis. Marcy didn't say a word about the fact that I didn't eat at home anymore. Marcy and Wally hatched a plan to avenge Tony's death. It all looked quite comical. Probably everything would have been different if I didn't know what was happening. After Marcy and I got to bed, Wally would enter the house through the sliding door on the back deck. She promised him that the door would not be locked. If everything goes according to plan, it will look like I was shot during an attempted robbery. If they heard the gunshot, Marcy and Karen would have called 911. I know it sounds stupid, but at that moment, I remembered that I had not changed the beneficiaries on my insurance policies. I gave my wife a sarcastic kiss as I walked out the door and got the finger in return. I had dinner with my parents and spent the evening there. Before I left, I borrowed my dad's snake charmer. A short-barreled 20-shot would be perfect for today's party. When I got home, Marcy was already in bed, but she had the light on, so I assumed she was reading. The only call on the answering machine was from Karen. She was bragging about the amazing intimacy she and Wally had been enjoying all day. Before she said goodbye, she promised Marcy that everything would be ready later that night. It took me about 20 minutes to replace the shot in the shells with rock salt. I had a full bag left over from last winter. I didn't want to kill Wally, just stop him. Damn it, I didn't want to kill Tony either. I was hoping Wally didn't have as bad a pump as Tony. I wanted to check the door to the back deck, but I was afraid Wally might see me. I had to assume Marcy had left it unlocked. I stripped down to my underpants and mixed up the blankets on the bed. It would have been nice to have a cup of coffee, but it wasn't ready, so I settled for Coca-Cola. I waited in my chair with my cell phone next to me. He appeared only after midnight. As soon as I saw him on the terrace, I dialed 911 and reported an intruder in my house. I carefully said that I was afraid for my life. I didn't hang up. The patio door slid open quietly, and Wally appeared. I waited until he was fully inside the house, and then fired the first shot. I was aiming for his lower body because I didn't want to accidentally kill the son of A. The first shot threw him back onto the terrace. When the second bullet hit him, he fell off the terrace, breaking the railing. I knew I didn't kill him because he howled like a stuck pig. God, that rock salt must have really hurt. I was amazed at how loud the shot sounded in the house. My ears were ringing like a bell. I turned on the light, and within seconds, Marcy was standing in the living room screaming. She was actually shouting something at me, but I couldn't make out the words. I went over to see how Wally was doing and saw a .22 caliber Ruger automatic pistol with a silencer on the floor. Marcy was still screaming, so I pointed the shotgun in her direction. She quickly shut up and ran out of the room. It looks like Wally broke his ankle when he fell. Some guys just get lucky. 10 minutes later, the first black and white car arrived. There wasn't much discussion. There I put the gun on the floor so there would be no misunderstanding of what was happening. I pointed to the phone, and one of the officers told the 911 operator that everything was under control. They asked who else was in the house, and I told them about Marcy in the bedroom. They brought her into the living room and discovered that they had made a big mistake. She had a mile of swearing coming out of her mouth a minute. I tried to distance myself from her while the police tried to shut her up. None of us succeeded. Finally, a woman in uniform larger than usual gently took her hand and led her outside. I noticed Karen standing outside with other neighbors. I smiled at her and slowly ran my index finger down her throat. She turned and quickly walked away, restoring my good mood. The ambulance arrived for Wally at the same time Detective Green arrived. When he saw me, he smiled, and I answered him with a wide smile. I wasn't trying to be a smart fifth place, but I just couldn't help myself. The Amazon cop brought Marcy back to the house so she could get dressed. She calmed down a little after. I got dressed, and we all went to the police department. I insisted that we ride in separate cars, and Detective Green allowed me to go with him. We didn't talk on the way to the center, but he looked at me and smiled again. It was already light when Green released me. We only talked for about half an hour, but they kept me close all night. I felt like I was in Guantanamo Bay because they constantly forced me to drink coffee. One of the black and white cars took me home. I was a little disappointed because I was expecting to see yellow tape around the house. This place looked like nothing had happened. The rock salt didn't even break through the glass side door. I think Wally got most of it. I figured it would take about an hour to fix the broken railings. I collapsed on the bed and woke up only after lunch. After emptying my bladder, I wandered into the kitchen and found my friendly detective sitting at the table, reading the newspaper and drinking fresh coffee, which I assumed he had made while I was sleeping. I'd had as much coffee as I wanted the night before, so I settled for a large glass of orange juice and sat down across from him. "You're a very tough guy, Mr. Mercer." He didn't even look up from the newspaper. I didn't know how to respond to this, so I remained silent. I couldn't understand whether he was playing with me or not. He finished his coffee. "Detective Green, I need to shower, shave, and get something to eat. I will do this unless it is against police regulations. Take your time, Danny. I have the whole day ahead of me." Walking into the shower, I wondered when he slept. Lunch consisted of 2 large sandwiches with stewed pork. Green even joined me, washing it all down with beer. Neither of us said a word, and after a while, the silence became unbearable. "You're dying to ask me some questions, aren't you, Mr. Mercer? It's funny, but I thought the same about you." My detective friend waved to the waiter and ordered 2 more beers. "I've been asking you questions all night. Now you're okay? First of all, where's my wife?" "We're still holding her. She will be arraigned this afternoon." I finished my beer. "Your wife's parents hired her a lawyer." I didn't expect this. Now I had 100 more questions, but the trouble was that the more questions I asked, the more I risked exposing myself. I decided it would be best to retreat. It was nice to see that Marcy's family was there because I wasn't going to be there. "I have no further questions, Detective Green, but if you feel the need to unburden yourself, you can start at any time." He took a long sip of his beer and laughed, not loudly, but definitely. "And one more thing, did you by any chance eavesdrop on or tape your wife's conversation with Mr. Williams? I assume you mean Wally." This made me smile slightly. "If I had such a film, would you need it?" "I don't know yet. If things go the way I think they will, it won't matter. But if one of them gets a good lawyer, maybe. If I had a tape like that, wouldn't it get me into trouble here?" "You are absolutely right. I'm just trying to make my job easier. I'll see what I can do without the cassette, which may or may not exist." I nodded slightly in gratitude. "Danny, baby, I think I should take you home. Your boys will be home from school soon, and they need their father." We arrived at the house just as the school bus dropped Todd and Terry off. They approached us, and I introduced them to my new detective friend. They wanted to see his badge. Everything seemed pleasant enough until Green leaned forward and said, "So, which one of you built the tugboat and which one built the monster truck?" "I built the truck," Todd shouted, puffing out his chest. "I made a tug. Do you want to watch it?" Terry was proud too. "Maybe next time I'll have a chance to look at them," Green said, "and now it's time for me to go." He left me standing there stunned and walked to his car with a big, shitty smile on his face. That son of a knew about the pink paint. He had my balls in his hand, and I couldn't do anything about it. That evening, we ordered pizza. The boys never asked where their mother was. After dinner, Marcy's father called and said he needed help raising bail money to get her out of jail. I tried to be as polite as possible when I turned him down. I'm not sure he understood what was going on, but at least he was trying to be a good father. I asked him where she was going to stay. He hesitated a little and then said that she would stay with them. The boys and I loaded all of Marcy's things into the pickup truck and unloaded them at Marcy's parents'. We collected everything without difficulty. When we got home, I noticed the U-Haul truck in Karen's driveway. The next morning, Marcy never called me. I had to read the newspaper every day to find out what was happening. Nobody told me anything. In fact, it was almost as if I was being deliberately left out. There was no trial. Marcy blamed it on Wally. Wally claimed it was all her idea. Ultimately, they both asked for clemency. Marcy received 3 to 5 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Wally received 5 to 10 years for attempted murder. Several federal people were called in about the muffler Wally had. They decided to wait until Wally finished his explanation before making changes. Detective Green didn't need the tape and never mentioned it again. Karen disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. My father was glad to have his shotgun back and promised that I could borrow it again if I needed it. He chuckled when he said this. I served Marcy with divorce papers as soon as she began serving her prison sentence. She didn't object. I had a feeling she didn't want anything to do with me because I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the night I shot Wally. I sold the house and moved back to my parents. I couldn't work or look after the boys myself. The guys at work were glad to see me back. For some reason, I was offered the opportunity to switch to the day shift, but I declined. I took the boys to the Muni Women's Prison to visit their mother every month. I waited in the car because they were usually there for less than an hour. Sometimes, in good weather, meetings took place outside. I was able to park and watch them through the chain-link fence. I never asked them about these visits and asked them not to tell me anything. It seemed to work great for all of us. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until I got a call. Hello, is this Daniel Mercer? Yes, I said. My name is Angela Hawkins. A detective named Darnell Green said I should call you. We need to discuss something. I know Detective Green, but why do you want to talk to me? Tony DeMarco was my brother. Oh, just when I thought all this crap was behind me, something like this was about to happen. I don't think this is a good idea. I'm sorry for your loss, but there's nothing I can do to help you. I hung up before she could say anything else. 2 days later, she called again. Daniel, I would be very grateful if you could visit me. I need to say something. Detective Green said you're a reasonable person. Where did you want to meet? I would prefer to do this at a car dealership, but any location that is convenient for you is fine with me. It took me a few seconds to come up with something. Meet me on Saturday at 10 in the morning in the exhibition hall. I will take my 2 sons with me. They like looking at old cars. I didn't know what she meant, but in a public place with boys, I felt safer. I wasn't using them as a shield or anything, but I felt that she would be less inclined to do anything if they were with me. I had no idea what kind of malice this woman harbored. If she was Tony's sister, then she was Italian. If she was Italian, then she had hot blood. If she's got hot blood, I have to be careful. At this point, I decided I was thinking too much. I needed a beer. I called Detective Green and asked him what was going on. He laughed and told me to meet her and stop worrying. It was easy for him to talk because he didn't kill her brother. The Continental Classic was a big, impressive place. In addition to the main showroom, they had 2 large buildings in the back holding cars in need of restoration or awaiting space on the showroom floor. I was shocked when we pulled up to see that they were having a big opening party. I didn't expect this. There were a lot of things I didn't understand yet. Terry and Todd seemed torn between cars and freebies. The first impression was the smell from the popcorn maker. A guy in soft boots and a rubber nose was handing out small bags of hot popped kernels. Off to the side stood a soda fountain and another clown with a hot dog cart. The guys won't need lunch today. It was not difficult to recognize Angela Hawkins. I realized this immediately as soon as I noticed that she was walking straight towards me with a slow and decisive gait. Everything about her spoke of an Italian: dark hair, dark eyes, olive complexion, and wide hips. I don't think a gentleman would have noticed her hips, but they were emphasized by her height. 5 feet at the most. Tony was huge, and his sister was short and wide. I felt myself getting a little excited as she got closer, and then I noticed a smaller clone next to her. The girl looked about 10 years old and was an exact copy of Angela, only her hair was a little lighter, and naturally, there were no hips at all. It looks like my interloper was covering up, just like me. We were a pretty miserable couple, both using our children for safety. As she closed the distance between us, her hand extended in a friendly manner. Daniel Mercer, I presume? It was quite natural and polite to shake her hand. I've always wanted to say this, like in the movie about Dr. Livingston. She smiled but seemed a little nervous, which made me feel a little better. I stood there dumb, and she continued to talk. This is my daughter, Carla. Todd smiled politely back and said his name, but Terry held out his hand to her with a grin. Carla, Why don't you show the boys around while I talk to their father?" Terry immediately followed Carla into the showroom, while Todd headed to the hot dog stand. I took this as a good sign. "We can talk here, downstairs, or upstairs in my office." "I think the office will be fine," those were the first words out of my mouth. As we walked towards the stairs leading to the elevated office, I noticed several employees looking in my direction and exchanging comments. Angela noticed this too and smiled at my embarrassment. The salespeople downstairs were wearing blue bowling shirts, so they were easy to spot. Unfortunately, they all seemed more interested in me than in the customers. One guy at the far end of the building smiled broadly at me and gave me a thumbs up. I smiled back but was a little nervous. "Did Detective Green tell you anything about my situation?" I didn't answer but just shook my head to show that he didn't do it. "I don't want to bore you with my life story, but I think there's something you need to know. Tony was my brother and the only relative I had. When Tony died, he didn't have a will. Since I was the only relative, I inherited his business. The lawyer took a big chunk, but I still got more than I expected. I was glad to see that someone got something useful out of this whole mess." While she was explaining something to me, I noticed that she had pierced ears and a wedding ring on her finger. She had a small silver cross hanging around her neck, but I had a hard time seeing it because my eyes kept focusing on her cleavage. I was just starting to remember how long it had been since I had a night when she interrupted me. "Mr. Mercer, what did you notice?" It was a trick question. She smiled when she asked this question. "I'm really sorry. I was just admiring your crucifix, and told myself to concentrate and look only into her eyes when she hit me on the hand. Would you like some beer?" That would be a good idea. There was a small refrigerator next to the table, and she had to bend over to get the drinks. One moment, I was forced to look at her cleavage, and the next, I saw a beautiful fifth place staring me straight in the face. She didn't explain anything to me, she just tried to seduce me. It may not have been intentional, but it worked damn well. She opened the lid and handed me the jar, trying not to lean over. We both took a few sips without saying a word. "Well, Miss Hawkins, I'm glad everything worked out for you, but I don't know why I'm here. It's time for me to get back to the guys before they start to worry. It will be better if you call me Angela. Can I call you Danny?" "Well, of course. Are we done here?" "No, damn it, just sit there and don't move until I'm done," Detective Green said. "You understand?" I didn't answer. If I keep my mouth shut, she'll do it faster. Tony was an idiot, he was a worthless son of A, and deserved to die. As strange as it may sound, I wanted to thank you. It was a trap, that damn detective set me up. Was the room bugged, or was it her? It's entirely possible that she has a bug hidden in her bra. Damn it, I was looking at her cleavage again. Do you have a wire or some kind of recording device? Of course not. Why would I do something like that? I finished my beer, although I was still not convinced. Maybe I better go down and see what the boys are up to. I wouldn't want them to get in trouble. Just sit down, she seemed pretty confident. There was no love between me and Tony. About 3 years ago, my husband died in an accident. He had no life insurance, and the guy who hit him had no insurance at all. I didn't have any work skills and had a daughter in my arms to raise. Tony was my only relative, so I asked him for help. He paid some of my husband's funeral expenses, and that was it. He didn't even answer my calls. Are you saying that his death was a good thing for you? Yes, and obviously for you too. Maybe we should both be grateful for what he paid and leave it at that. Angela smiled and finished her beer. You don't want to talk about this anymore, do you? I nodded and began to rise from the chair. I need your service. You are the only one who can help me. What can I do for you? I want you to come and work for me as a general manager. You are crazy. I don't know anything about the car business, especially fancy cars like yours. I know that myself. I have people to take care of it. Why do you need me? Angela seemed a little nervous. She looked first at her feet, then at the walls. Her eyes darted around as she tried to find the words. Did you see how my people looked at you when you came to the office with me? Well, yes, they didn't even smile. They all think you killed Tony. Not only did you kill him, but you made a laughing stock out of him when you did it. They were all afraid of Tony. They seem to be afraid of you now. Their fear is like respect. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do they not respect you? No, they're going to tear me apart left and right, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it. I'm not smart enough or tough enough to keep them in line. What good can I do? Mostly just be here. After a while, we will both be able to learn the business well enough to be able to control what happens. Until then, I need you to intimidate them. I'm a good guy, Angela. That's why Tony and my wife tried to take advantage of me. Now she felt a little calmer. It didn't work out too well for them, did it? For some strange reason, I found this funny and even laughed a little. Over the next 30 minutes, Angela and I discussed the terms. She had no problem exceeding the salary and benefits that I received at the factory. If things don't work out, I can always come back. I really didn't want to go back. I wanted things to get better. Todd didn't look good when we got downstairs. Too many hot dogs and too much soda. Terry, on the other hand, was having a great time. He seemed to be talking to cars more than looking at them. This was definitely a good sign. Todd threw up in the truck on the way home and missed dinner. On Monday, I started work. Everything went exactly as Angela predicted. I was amazed at how quickly I was able to familiarize myself with this work. I became close to several employees and soon had my eye on them. The blue shirt that gave me a big smile on the first day was Glenn's cousin, who was my biggest supporter. Most employees wanted the business to prosper and were more than willing to work quietly. Angela let me take up shooting, and I discovered that I enjoyed it. I truly lived up to my reputation. Detective Green stopped by for coffee a few times, but the conversation was usually light and friendly. I finally got him to open up a little. 3 years ago, I was a police officer in Philadelphia. One day, I came home and found my wife in bed with my boss. I beat the crap out of him on the spot and threw my wife out. The police department gave me the choice to quit or be fired. A week later, I had a job here. Before I left, I made sure that the son of a who was sleeping with my wife was also fired. I didn't bother asking him for more information. It was his own business. At least I understood why he seemed to be leaning on my side. The boys agreed not to tell their mother about my new job. On visiting days, they made a few comments about the long trip but seemed to understand that they had no choice. I felt it was important for Marcy to see her sons, but I did it not for her sake but to rub salt in her wounds. I know, this is a disgusting way to use your children, but I got some sneaky pleasure from it. Angela and I spent more time together at work and after work. One weekend, the boys insisted that I take her and Carla to Noble Grove. Most of the time, we just stayed close to home. Living conditions seemed to make any chance of a romantic relationship difficult. I was definitely interested in a closer relationship with Angela, but it was awkward. I still lived in my parents' house with the boys, and Angela and Carla had a small one-room apartment. Since things were going much better than expected, Angela started talking about buying a house. She spent a lot of time on the computer searching for the perfect option. I received my first call when she explained why she wanted a 4-bedroom apartment. Danny, I think it's very important that each of the boys has their own room. It's better to take care of these things now than later, don't you agree? Of course. I immediately realized that the question was rigged. I also realized that Angela saw me as more than just an employee. The potential for romance looked better. Yes, I think that's a great idea. I also think a split-bedroom plan would be a good thing to consider. I don't like that they are too close to the master bedroom. Having said that, I left the office and noticed a slight smile on her face. It was a strange relationship. We never had an intimate or even came close to it. We never even kissed, but I felt closer to her than I had to Marcy in 12 years. 2 days later, when I was finally divorced from Marcy, we all went to Red Lobster to celebrate. The kids didn't know the reason for the party, but Angela did. Later back home, the kids were watching pay-per-view when Angela cornered me in the kitchen and stood on her tiptoes to kiss me. We were hugging and giggling when Carla came into the room. Oops, sorry, Mom. Turning to leave, she added, that time has come. When we returned to the living room, Carla was whispering something in Terry's ear, and they were both smiling. Angela and I were on our best behavior for the rest of the evening, but I was looking forward to what would happen next. The next day, while the kids were at school, Angela and I had a long lunch and returned home. We both had a lot of pent-up energy to burn off. We returned to work just before the end of the working day. There were many long lunches after that, and Angela began to get serious about finding a home. Detective Green came by regularly, mostly just to chat, but from time to time, he would glance at the cars. He fell in love with a Studebaker Hawk that used to belong to film critic Roger Ebert. "Angela, I need you to take me to Marcy." This was an unexpected request. The boys and I went there less often than before, but Marcy never seemed to complain. "Any special reasons?" "Close business I need to finish." "I still don't understand what this means." "Do you want me to go with you?" "Just take me there." "You don't have to be with me while I'm talking to her." It was a warm, sunny autumn day when we arrived in Muni. The meetings with the prisoners took place on the street, so I parked near the fence. 10 minutes later, Marcy and Angela walked out into the courtyard and sat down at one of the tables. They both chatted and smiled as if they were long-lost friends. 5 minutes later, things got even more interesting. The smile disappeared from Marcy's face. Now she stood, leaning over the picnic table, scowling at her guest. Angela, on the other hand, still seemed happy. Marcy suddenly rushed across the table and tried to grab her. The chaos was quickly quelled by several security guards as they led my ex-wife back into the building, kicking and screaming. Angela turned and looked at me, smiled, and shrugged before leaving the visitor area. She was still smiling when she returned to the car. "What the hell does this all mean?" "Your ex-wife is a very touchy," Angela seemed to giggle to herself. We drove a few more miles, and then she turned slightly, tightening her seatbelt. I introduced myself, and she seemed happy to see me. Everything was fine as long as she thought I was on her side. I admit that I misled her a little at first. "What do you have in mind?" I told her I came from Baltimore to get revenge. This seemed to make her happy because she thought I meant revenge against you. Of course, all I really meant was that I was going to get even with Tony by taking over his business. I think you can still take revenge on a dead person, right? Okay, but what made her so upset? She wanted to know the details, like when, where, and how. Of course, I knew she meant you, and now I got interested. I told her it would take a long, long time and asked if she wanted me to keep her informed of what was going on. She readily agreed and insisted on knowing exactly how I planned to do it. When I told her how I was going to do it, she blew her mind. She lost it. She just went crazy. That was great. "Okay, fine. How the hell are you going to kill me?" "And now I want to know." Her smile grew even wider. I told her I was going to do a night with you to death, and that was all. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I thought she might get angry, but I never expected her to cross the line. There was silence for a few moments. We both sat and smiled. I was so proud of her. "When do you plan to launch this attack?" "As soon as we get to the next motel." 2 months later, Angela and I got married. It was a small ceremony in the backyard of our new home. Angela sent Marcy a wedding invitation with a small note inside. "Everything goes according to plan. He should die in 40 to 50 years. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the situation is as ambiguous as possible, so it is difficult to decide who is right and who is to blame. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.